As we look at what we need to have in place to ensure that as we give people credit, they will give it back to us, there is a very interesting thing called a PPSR, which I don't think many people have heard about. So Mel, firstly, what is a PPSR?
So exactly, Bill, it's something that is one of the most impactful things in business, but one of the things that business owners understand the least. So PPSR stands for Personal Property Security Register.
Okay.
And it's based on a piece of legislation called the Personal Property Securities Act. The simplest way of explaining it is the security interest that's placed in an item that you've purchased. So for example, if I go to a motor vehicle company and I purchase a car from them but I don't pay for it in full, I may seek finance to pay for that car. That finance company then places a security interest, a personal property security registration in that vehicle, which means that if non-payment occurs, they have the ability to go and repossess that vehicle, and ownership is not transferred until that vehicle has been paid for.
Okay, so I understand that with a car. What can you and can't you use it on?
So a PPSR is really used in different ways in business. A PPSR is used on goods and materials that I am providing to you. So for example, if I'm a boiler manufacturer, I may have a third paid to me upon placing an order. I might have a third paid to me on delivery of that boiler. I then might have a third paid to me 3 months later, or whatever the agreement is. And it's often that last third that is the defaulted portion of that payment. So what we want to be able to do is legally go in and recover that boiler. We can't just say, it's okay, I'll go and get it. You need to have a PPSR in place which shows you have a security interest in those goods to go and recover them. So it's recovering goods that you have provided to your client. Another area that is really important for PPSR is if I am a person doing a job on a site for an extended period of time and I'm leaving my gear on that site, if that site was to get shut down because of liquidation, I want to be able to recover my gear and any materials I have provided onto that site so that it's not seized as part of the liquidated assets of that project. So if I'm a scaffolder, for example, or if I'm a digger and that is going to be on site for more than 3 or 6 months, which may very well be the case, I want to protect my ownership in those goods and materials by registering a PPSR interest in those goods and materials.
I don't think a lot of people realise that the liquidator can come in and grab whatever is on site, even though it may not be owned by the company. That might be quite an eye-opener for a few people.
Correct.
Okay. So what does it do from that liquidation point of view? Does it help, does it do anything to your status as perhaps an unsecured creditor?
100%. So there's a really scary piece of legislation or a part of that legislation around PPSR, which is something called preferential payment clawback. So a third way that we might use a PPSR and the most common one, is to be able to register your financial interest in a relationship between yourself and that customer. So that if for whatever reason that client goes into liquidation, then you are more likely to get paid out as a secured creditor. You're also not going to be subject to the preferential payment clawback. So what the preferential payment clawback states is that if I have been paid as a tradesman or a supplier in priority over the taxes or wages in order to see that job through, and that project goes into liquidation, then that money that has been paid to me in priority over the taxman can potentially be clawed back. And that can actually happen as far back as 6 years or 2 years after you've done a job. So becoming a secured creditor through PPSR to protect your financial interest in that relationship as well as your goods and equipment you're supplying is vital.
So you're saying that they could pay me for my job and the liquidator could come in and go, I want that money back?
Correct. If you're an unsecured creditor and you've been paid in priority over a secured creditor.
Oh, interesting. So if we've got 100 people owed money and 10 of them are secured, having a PPSR means you're no longer in this group of 90. You move up here and join the 10, to make that 11 people who are at the head of the line.
Correct. And it is a queue, so well said. So what actually happens when you register a security interest is that you are the next in the queue. So the sooner you register your financial interest, the higher up that queue.
So it's
are.
timing. The sooner you put it on, you're further up the line.
Correct, and in fact, taking that timing further, there's a critical period in which to register a PPSR. So if you and I are doing business together and I present you with my documents, and within that document you have the PPSR clause, so I can register a PPSR, you've actually got 10 working days to register that PPSR, for that PPSR to be totally valid. So time factor is actually really important.
Okay, but it's got to be in a clause in your terms.
Correct.
Okay, and that's what gives you permission.
100% correct.
Wow. Well, for a bunch of letters that no one knew what meant, PPSR, you can also see the power of knowing what it is, how to use it, and how you have to be ready to use it within your terms and conditions. It's a slightly more complex piece of legislation that needs explaining. You need to find out and see if a PPSR makes sense for yourself. Maybe you have a look at your debts, and there are debts this big that you go, that's worth putting a little bit of money into, and debts this big, you just go, we'll take our chance. Because the PPSR is something you can choose to put on. However, if you don't have the choice to put the PPSR on, then you're going to be number 11 to number 100, along with everyone else who quite possibly doesn't get paid. Explore a PPSR, it could be a very important part of your credit control.